Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. This is the show where I take a look at every classic Doctor Who story plus a bunch of big finished audio dramas, one episode a day, 7 days a week. And today, on the 28th of June 2019, we are starting to look at the third story in the Key to Time arc, and the third story of season 16, The Stones of Blood, starting with part 1. Once again, written by a new writer, this time David Fisher, who will write until basically the end of the Fourth Doctor's run. But this is his first. This is his first credit for Doctor Who. And what is very interesting is that the first episode of The Stones of Blood very much pays tribute to the Robert Holmes, Philip Hinchcliffe horror style of doing Doctor Who. We open with a group of cultists in a stone circle making a sacrifice to the Kaliak, which is revealed later in the episode to be sort of a crow, sort of goddess type spirit thing of Irish mythology. I'm very probably saying that name wrong, because it's one of those names that you don't always get right. But the cultists in this episode, you meet them. They're kind of idiots. It's DeFreeze and his wife. It's one of those interesting little sort of story tidbits where you get the feeling that that they don't they don't really make a lot of sense. They basically leave. The Doctor is even put on the list, yes, we'll sacrifice him. We'll do a human sacrifice, even though before this point they had basically only done animal sacrifices, sort of indicating that there is a big sort of a really big sort of building to the story. Overall, as an episode, it's a lot of fun for this, but you forget quite a lot here. You have a lot of really fun stuff introduced. David Fisher does a good job with the characters. First off, the Doctor and Romana are great. This is one of those stories where this is the first story where Romana comes to Earth, and you have this amazing bit where she tells K9 to forget tennis, because it actually uses the phrase as they're leaving the TARDIS, "Who's for tennis?" Meaning who wants to go outside and get soaking wet. It's one of these. It's one of those little lines that really, really do make you feel like, yeah, this is a great story here, because as a story, it's you have them there, so Romana being not understanding tennis, then asks K9 just to forget it after K9 does his usual K9 thing and rattles off a bunch of random facts about tennis, random not usable facts about tennis. You then meet Professor Amelia Rumford, who is the longest in the long line of old ladies whom Tom Baker's Doctor meets and has a lot of fun with, and she is perhaps one of the most fun she's like, oh, you're obviously here for an archaeological expedition. Yes, I've already studied this. The 9 travelers circle these giant stones. They come across a depression that seems to be something very heavy. And her young assistant, Mrs. Vivian Fay, who is another strong female character. A lot of sort of strong female characters in this story, which is something that is very... it's actually pretty different than what's, usually happens here. It's one of those. It's one of those odd things. Professor Rumford being played by Beatrix Lehman and Vivian Fay being played by Susan Engel. It's just a really good relationship. One of the big issues here is that the first episode cliffhanger is just kind of badly shot. This was directed by Daryl Blake, who is this is the only story he directed, and what's odd is that as a director, he just sort of, for the first episode cliffhanger, he just sort of shoots Romana. She calls out the doctor. She yells for something to keep back and falls off a cliff. It's a mysterious cliffhanger, and the mystery element being played up is okay. It's just kind of weird. Like, it should have perhaps been a bit more, just a bit more focused on trying to get things going. It's one of those. It's one of those. It's one of those very odd little endings, and it doesn't quite work as a cliffhanger. But overall, the first episode is full of good tension. It gives us a good start to the story. So overall, I'm going to give The Stones of Blood Part 1 a 9 out of 10. It is the 29th of June 2019, and I just finished watching Part 2 of The Stones of Blood. Part 2 of The Stones of Blood is very interesting, mainly because, partially because as an episode, it's our first one that actually gives us what the aliens are. They are basically they're basically stones, like the giant stones. Yeah, they can move. They have sentience. They don't speak. David Fincher does a good job of not making them speak, and they really are they really are a horrifying foe because they don't speak. Because not having them speak makes it easier. Makes it much easier for them to work. Not only work as a foe, but it makes them as this looming threat as they sort of go and attack. Like the big moment is that you see DeFreeze and his, it turns out it's not his wife, it's his maid, get attacked by the stones. And near the end of this episode, and what is interesting, what's interesting is that it kills them. It, like, halfway through the episode, they become casualties, and it's very dark. Now, what's also good is that a lot of the episode is focused as well on just the Doctor trying to find Romana, who fell off the cliff. She's holding on as best as she can. Oddly enough, it's the Doctor and Professor Rumford who find her. they have this stuff about because K9 gets involved, giving K9 something to do. There's some great bits of brevity with K9 as basically a character who can't really get off the island, they can't really he can't really sort of he can't help. He finds Romana, which is great, and a lot of stuff is taken of just trying to get the Doctor and Romana to their points. Like, you have a lot of investigations, all essentially building up to basically building up to the entire basically as the entire story builds around trying to figure out who the Calic is, what is it with these sacrifices, what's going on. It is one of those stories where it's an episode that basically ends with the big reveal that Vivian Faye, who hasn't been evil, but she has been at least a little threatening, basically makes Romana disappear with what looks like magic. It's most definitely a sort of there's something deeper going on here, and this is after the Doctor finds a bunch of paintings who owned the hall that were the same person, because they find paintings with Vivian Faye's face, which is just it's one of those weird little things where it's like, well, what's going on? You have a lot of questions raised, and in raising these questions, one of the best decisions was obviously not repeating the cliffhanger, but the Stones of Blood episode 2, part 2 is very, it goes along at a very good pace. It beats all the questions, and it's like, okay, where are we going from here? Okay, what's the plan? What are the characters doing? Do we have any reason to believe we know what's really going on here? And where our characters could be headed, basically, in the future. It's all done excellently. And the big cliffhanger moment is great. Overall, I'm going to give The Stones of Blood Part 2 a 10 out of 10. It is the 30th of June 2019, and I just finished watching Part 3 of The Stones of Blood, which is an episode where we kind of shift our parameters. I'm not going to say it's a bad episode. Far from it. It's a good episode. We get a lot of the mystery still going on. You have a lot of the first half of the episode is devoted mainly to the Doctor trying to save Romana. Perhaps playing a little too much into the Romana is a damsel in distress, even though she's kind of shown herself to be capable. Though this one she was just caught off guard and she's been locked up. When we find her, she's locked up and shackled to a wall, so there's absolutely nothing she can do to actually save herself. So it's not the worst case of using the damsel in distress trope. But this is But we get we go a bit away from the gothic and more into the science fiction-y side of things, which not bad. It's actually quite nice to go into science fiction. This is a science fiction show. This is a science fiction show, of course. Interestingly, the idea is that there's a spaceship in hyperspace around this area, and the big idea is that, well, that must be where this third segment of the Key to Time is, bringing us back into the arc. It also, the Doctor recognizes the stones as augury, which are just that. They're giant. There's giant stones that they feed. The idea is that they feed kind of off of. The idea is that they feed off of. They feed off of globulin, not blood itself, but like globulin, which is a chemical in blood. I think the idea is that on their home planet, I'm guessing, they must have a some sort of source of globulin, basically, so they don't survive. Vivian Faye is the one in control. We're not doing much to explain who Vivian Faye is. She's obviously not who she says it is, which is it's honestly that's great. Susan Engel is excellent at making the character seem not only mysterious but dark and scary. But a lot of the fun here is watching the Dr. K9 and Professor Rumford trying to build a machine to get into hyperspace. The Doctor realizes, well, she's powering her wand through crystals, so she must have crystals somewhere. So so what does he do? He tries to find the crystals and basically build a thing. Of course, he gets it wrong the first time around, which is this great little bit of humor. Now, what is interesting, what is really interesting is and fun is once we get to in hyperspace, there's this spaceship where you see a dead Warren. There's just it's obviously a prison transport ship, and the idea is that it has been there for a long time. It's a big history, a very long history of the Earth has basically been built. Has been built in this area. What else is interesting is that you have that it's that somehow the Megara, which are these twinkling lights, which is a bit of a lame effect, but they're the sort of justice machines. They're basically policemen, but they also can judge and execute criminals. The Doctor released them, which is a transgression of the law. So he's some of the sense comes is that they're putting the Doctor on trial, because he's he's the one who let them out, which is it's an interesting look at justice. That's what gets him into trouble. It's not like, he didn't know. It's you did this, so you're in trouble. It's your fault. You're terrible. What's really interesting is that as an episode, it's one where it still manages to do this really nice balance between the sort of the horror type story that they're going for and just some harder sci-fi. It's a really good balance. Tom Baker pulls it off amazingly. He's as a Doctor, he's always great at doing at doing stories like this. But also you have the you have a lot of the characters really working well, and the big cliffhanger is also pretty effective overall. You have basically Vivian destroying the Doctor's machine while the Doctor's still in hyperspace, so now he's stuck there. There's nothing that Professor Rumford and K9 can really do. They can't save uh, they can't save him because he's stuck in a completely different area. He's stuck in a different place. But overall, a really really overall it's a good episode, and the only problem here is that the Magar itself is a bit is a bit it's a bit that the story doesn't entirely work out on, but overall it's still good. So I'm going to give The Stones of Blood Part 3 a 9 out of 10. It is the 1st of July 2019, and I just finished watching Part 4 of The Stones of Blood. Now, Part 4 of The Stones of Blood is an episode that, for me, I'm a little torn, because it's sadly the weakest episode of the story. David Fisher does not do a good job at wrapping everything up in a nice, neat bow like he perhaps should have been working towards. Instead, he basically just has it so, the characters, we just do this big extended courtroom drama sequence because that's something that that'll make the story work. Let's have a random courtroom drama. Now, yes, there is plenty of the Doctor having his having his big courtroom, but and a big sequence and a big and a really big a big story around it. But sadly, and the humor is great, but sadly there's not enough really courtroom material, and there's not enough material on Earth to really do everything. We get the backstory of who Vivian Faye is. She's Cessair of Diplos, who was a criminal, murderer, ended up stealing the Justice Robot, and the entire Justice Robot plot is solved by basically some clever wordplay, which is something that feels very much like something Tom Baker would do as the Doctor. Like, the script is obviously written with Tom Baker in mind, but it just, the entire story feels like, we were trying to get us to a conclusion, and we just didn't. It basically felt like, we didn't quite know where we were actually going. We didn't have an idea for that in mind. We just did the story and sort of wrote our. It almost feels like Fisher wrote himself into a corner. Because once the Cessair Diplos is defeated, it's grab the segment. And by magic they get back. Because that's what the Megara do. They send them back with Cessair of Diplos, where she is then turned into stone, to stand forever. Which is also just, that's just a weird way of ending the story. It's like, we aren't actually gonna do a good big ending. No, we're just gonna stop here, and that's basically all you're gonna get. Okay, so have fun. We're moving on to a different plot, which is just, it's weak. It's a weak way of ending the plot. and just a way that it ends in a way where you really think, oh, we could have really had something here. Still, Tom Baker and Mary Tam are great. Beatrix Lyman as Professor Rumford is great. Susan Engel is a great villainess. As always, like it's a good idea. You have this really good sense that Cesare Diblos might have been working with the Black Guardian, but that's all subtext, mainly from the beginning of the first episode having the Black Guardian, having the White Guardian just chant "Beware the Black Guardian" again, which was a genuinely quite, a creepy little, oh, are we might be getting deeper into this, something that is, something very, very deep and dark might be going on, and the story is basically turning to reflect that. It's just kind of sad, therefore, that as a story, it as an episode, it doesn't live up to some of the great stuff that the first few episodes were really doing, and it just doesn't go to what should be a solid conclusion. It's a story that ends pretty poorly. It's one where the characters they don't quite know. We don't quite know what we're doing. We kind of had an idea going in. Overall, it's an enjoyable enough episode. Cast is great. The direction is really nice. Like, there's a lot of care was taken with the exterior shots to really get, just to really drive home the fact that, we're outside. We're in a desolated area of the English countryside, and we're doing something nice. But overall, it's not as good as those first 3 episodes were. So overall, I'm going to give The Stones of Blood Part 4 a 7 out of 10. That being said, we add up the scores and average them out to give The Stones of Blood a final score of 8.75 out of 10. Thank you, everybody, for watching this installment of the Ultimate Doctor Who Marathon. As always, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. And join me next time when we take a look at the 4th story in Season 16 and the search for the 4th segment of the Key to Time in The Androids of Tara.